Beneath a sky dark with smoke, a Prussian soldier charges into a storm of lead. The line at Gravelotte holds the fate of empires, and no one will yield. The fields west of Metz shimmered under the August sun, a deceptive calm cloaking the tension that thrummed beneath. It was August 17th, 1870, and Marshal Francois Bazaine stood atop a low rise, his telescope sweeping the horizon where Prussian campfires flickered like distant stars. His army, 180,000 strong, the largest France could muster, sprawled across the rolling terrain, entrenched in a line stretching from Gravelotte to St. Privat. Redoubts bristled with cannon, infantry hunkered behind earthworks, and the chassepot rifles gleamed in the hands of men hardened by weeks of retreat. Wissembourg and Spitzeren had bloodied France's pride, but here, Bazaine vowed, the tide would turn. He lowered the telescope, his broad face etched with resolve. "They'll come for us," he told his aide, a wiry captain scribbling notes. "And we'll grind them down." His strategy leaned on the land, hills and villages forming a natural rampart, his numbers a wall to halt Prussia's advance. Orders from Napoleon III burned in his pocket: hold the line. Strike if they falter. Bazaine harbored no illusions of the emperor's desperation, but he saw opportunity. If he could bleed the Prussians here, France might rally. "Double the ammunition," he ordered. "We fight to the last." Across the valley, General Helmuth von Moltke sat in his field headquarters, a canvas tent pitched amid the hum of Prussian preparations. Maps sprawled across a folding table, pins marking Bazaine's line. A formidable barrier, but one he intended to shatter. His Third and Second Armies, 210,000 men under Crown Prince Frederick and Prince Frederick Charles, coiled like a predator scenting prey. Spitzeren's costs still rankled. Steinmetz's folly had bruised his plans, but the French retreat had delivered Bazaine into his grasp. "They've entrenched," he mused, his voice a low rasp as he adjusted a pin. "Good. We'll pin them, then break them." Moltke's mind was a lattice of precision. Wissembourg had opened the door, Spitzeren widened it. Now, Gravelotte would be the hammer blow. He envisioned a double envelopment. Frederick's Third Army striking the French left at Gravelotte, Frederick Charles's Second curling around St. Privat to the right. The Krupp guns would soften the line, infantry would fix Bazaine in place, and the flanks would close like jaws. "Speed and coordination," he told his staff, his gray eyes unyielding. "Signal the princes, attack at dawn." In Paris, Napoleon III hunched over a desk in the Tuileries, the lamplight casting harsh shadows across his pallid face. Telegrams from Bazaine piled beside him, position secure. Enemy sighted. His chest ached, each breath a struggle, but his will clung to hope. "Bazaine must hold," he whispered, his voice brittle. Marshal Bazaine loomed nearby, insistent. "Order him to advance, sire. Crush them before they mass." Napoleon shook his head, fingers tracing a map. "No. He stands fast. We need a victory, not a rout." It was a fragile thread, his empire's fate tethered to a general he barely trusted. The trap set, Bazaine's defiance rooted in numbers, Moltke's ambition honed by strategy, Napoleon's desperation a distant echo. Dusk fell, the air thickening with the promise of slaughter. Tomorrow, the crucible would ignite. Dawn broke over the fields west of Metz on August 18, 1870, a pale light piercing the haze that clung to the earth. Prussian artillery, rows of Krupp guns, their barrels cold and gleaming, unleashed a thunderous roar, shattering the stillness. Shells arced across the valley, slamming into the French line from Gravelotte to St. Privat, tearing through earthworks and flesh with merciless precision. The ground shuddered, smoke rising in thick plumes as the largest battle of the war ignited. Beneath a sky dark with the promise of ruin, the crucible of steel flared to life. Marshal Francois Bazaine stood at his command post near St. Privat, a stone farmhouse perched on the ridge. The first salvo rocked the walls, dust cascading from the rafters, but his broad frame remained steady. "Hold," he bellowed, his voice cutting through the din as his 180,000 men braced behind their defenses. The French line stretched like a taut bowstring. Infantry in trenches, cannon bristling from redoubts, chassepot rifles leveled at the valley below. Bazaine's strategy was unyielding. Let the Prussians come, let the terrain and firepower grind them to dust. "They'll break against us," he growled, peering through the smoke. "Fire at will." Across the field, General Helmuth von Moltke watched from a low rise, his telescope trained on the chaos unfolding. His 210,000 troops surged forward. Crown Prince Frederick's Third Army hammering Gravelotte on the French left, Prince Frederick Charles's second striking St. Privat to the right. The artillery barrage was his opening gambit, softening Bazaine's wall for the infantry to breach. "Keep the guns firing," he ordered, his tone icy as he adjusted his spectacles. "Fix them in place, then the flanks close." His plan was a vice, and he wielded it with the patience of a predator stalking wounded prey. The Prussian advance crashed into Gravelotte first, Frederick's men charging through a hail of French lead. The village's stone walls became a killing ground. Chassepot volleys scythed through the ranks, dropping hundreds in sprays of crimson. Shells from Bazaine's cannon tore gaps in the blue tide, earth erupting in geysers of dirt and bone. Yet the Prussians pressed on, their discipline a steel core, bayonets flashing as they reached the trenches. Hand-to-hand fighting erupted, a brutal dance of steel and screams, the French holding firm under Bazaine's iron gaze. At St. Privat, the Prussian guard led Frederick Charles's assault, their dark plumes bobbing as they scaled the ridge. Bazaine's right flank, elite troops under General Camembert, unleashed a storm of fire, the Chassepots' range carving a bloody swath. Entire companies fell, the guard's proud banners toppling into the mud. Moltke's jaw tightened as reports filtered in. Thousands lost in minutes, the right flank stalling. "Too soon," he muttered, cursing the prince's haste. "Bring up the artillery, blast them loose." Fresh guns rolled forward, their shells pounding St. Privat's defenses, shattering stone and resolve. Bazaine paced, sweat beading on his brow as the Prussian tide swelled. "Reinforce Camembert," he shouted, sending reserves to bolster the right. The farmhouse trembled, a near miss rocking the ground. Through the haze, he saw the enemy's intent, flanks curling, a noose tightening. His numbers held, but cracks spidered through his line. Gravelotte wavered, its defenders thinning under relentless pressure. "We can outlast them," he insisted, gripping his saber, though doubt gnawed at his certainty. Moltke adjusted his strategy mid-strike, his mind a whirl of angles and odds. "Signal Frederick, push harder at Gravelotte," he ordered. "Charles, wait for the guns at St. Privat." The artillery doubled its fury, shells raining until the French right buckled. Camerbert's men faltered, their trenches overrun as dusk loomed. Bazaine saw the tide turn, his heart sinking. "Fall back to Metz," he rasped, the order a bitter pill. His army retreated, harried by Prussian cheers, leaving 12,000 behind, killed or wounded, against Moltke's 20,000 lost. Night fell, the firestorm spent. Moltke lowered his telescope, a grim satisfaction settling in. Bazaine was trapped, the road to Paris opening. The crucible had forged a costly victory, and the war's jaws snapped closer. The last echoes of gunfire faded over Gravelotte and St. Privat, swallowed by a night heavy with smoke and silence. General Helmuth von Moltke stood in his tent, the lantern's glow casting stark lines across his face as he studied the map before him. Pins marked the day's triumph, Bazaine's line broken, his army bottled in Metz's walls, but the cost weighed like lead. 20,000 Prussian dead or wounded, a toll that dwarfed the French losses. Victory gleamed through the carnage, yet Moltke's satisfaction was tempered, his mind already racing toward the next move. He traced a finger along Metz's perimeter, a fortress now a cage. "We've pinned them," he said, his voice a low rasp to his aide. "Bazaine's trapped, let him rot there." The battle had been a brutal grind, the guard's slaughter at St. Privat a jagged scar, but the French retreat handed him the prize. His envelopment had worked. Frederick's push at Gravelotte, Charles's belated break at St. Privat, locking Bazaine's 180,000 in a noose. "Shift the Second Army south," he ordered. "Paris is our target now." The scales had tipped, and Moltke wielded the momentum with a surgeon's precision. In Metz, François Bazaine slumped against the farmhouse wall, its stones still warm from the day's fire. His uniform hung loose, stained with sweat and dust, his broad hands clutching a report. 12,000 lost, the line abandoned. The retreat had been chaos, men stumbling through the dark, Prussian shells chasing them to the city's gates. "We held as long as we could," he muttered to his aide, the words a shield against the truth. He'd trusted the ridge, his numbers, but Moltke's jaws had closed too fast. Now encircled, he faced a siege, or worse, Napoleon's wrath. Bazaine scribbled a dispatch to Paris, his pen trembling. Enemy repulsed, but at great cost. Metz secure for now. It was half a lie, a plea to buy time. "We'll regroup," he insisted, though his voice cracked. "They bled more than we did." The justification rang hollow. His army was trapped, its strength draining with each passing hour. He stared out the window, Prussian campfires ringing the horizon like a crown of thorns, and felt the weight of failure settle deep. In Paris, Napoleon III received Bazaine's message in the Tuileries' dim study, the telegram slipping from his grasp to the floor. "Repulsed?" he croaked, his chest heaving with a cough that rattled his frame. Marshal loomed beside him, face flushed with fury. "He's lost the field, sire. Trapped like a rat." The Emperor's eyes burned, tears of rage and despair blurring the map before him. Gravelotte was no victory. It was a cage, and with it, his empire's heart slipped further from his grip. "Order him to break out," he rasped. "We can't lose Metz." In Berlin, Otto von Bismarck paced his study, a glass of claret in hand as a courier relayed Moltke's report. 20,000 lost stung, but the French confinement was gold. "Bazaine's done," he said, a thin smile breaking his stern mask. "Moltke's genius prevails." He crossed to the map, slamming a pin into Metz, then traced a line to Paris. The war's rhythm quickened, Napoleon's legions dwindled, Germany's star rose. "Summon Wilhelm," he told his aide. "Tell him the road is clear. We march for the capital." Moltke folded his map, the lantern flickering as he stepped into the night. The cost was steep, but the prize was worth it. Bazaine neutralized, France exposed. In Metz, Bazaine's defiance curdled into dread, his army a prisoner of his choices. In Paris, Napoleon's order sped east, a desperate cry against the tide. In Berlin, Bismarck's ambition burned brighter. The scales had tipped, and the crucible's heat forged a new path, straight to France's heart. Night deepened over Metz, the city's walls a shadowed fortress beneath a sky streaked with fading smoke. A French soldier, his uniform tattered and face hollowed by exhaustion, leaned against a cannon barrel, peering through the gloom at the Prussian campfires encircling the horizon. The retreat from Gravelotte and St. Privat had left his hands trembling, 12,000 comrades lost, their cries still ringing in his ears. The air carried the faint tang of blood and earth, a reminder of the day's slaughter. Inside Metz, Bazaine's army, once France's pride, huddled, 180,000 souls trapped by Moltke's iron ring. The soldier clutched his chassepot, its barrel cold against his palm. Beyond the walls, Prussian sentries moved like specters, their silhouettes sharp against the flickering flames. He'd seen the enemy's tide at St. Privat, blue ranks falling under his fire, only to rise again, relentless. Now they held the field, and Metz was a cage. Bazaine's orders echoed in the barracks, "Hold fast. Reinforcements will come." The words felt thin, a whisper against the tightening noose. The soldier's gaze dropped to the mud at his feet, stained with the day's retreat, and dread coiled in his chest. In Berlin, Otto von Bismarck stood by a window, the city's lights a faint glow beyond the glass. A telegram from Moltke lay on his desk, Bazaine contained. "Losses heavy, but path to Paris clear." He lifted a cigar, its ember flaring as he inhaled, the smoke curling like a victor's crown. 20,000 Prussian lives spent, yet the prize was worth it. France's eastern army neutered, Napoleon's grip slipping. "To the Kaiser," he murmured, raising a glass of claret in a solitary toast. "And to the empire we build." The Prussian campfires multiplied, a constellation of menace ringing Metz. Helmuth von Moltke's trap had snapped shut, his gaze already turning west. In Paris, Napoleon III's desperate plea to Bazaine sped through the wires, a fading echo of a crumbling throne. The soldier shifted, his breath fogging in the chill, and wondered how long they could hold. Bismarck exhaled, the cigar's glow a beacon of his ambition. The siege began, and with it, France's heartland lay bare, a prize ripe for the taking.